It was a regular workday, just like any other. I had been working at that office for 7 years, and everything seemed uneventful. But suddenly, 3 messages from 3 different clients appeared on my phone, one after another, notifying me that they had to cancel their appointments for the day. Rescheduling appointments wasn't unusual in my job, but getting 3 consecutive cancellations like that is odd. With a fully booked schedule from morning till evening, I hadn't prepared any backup work, leaving me with 4 empty hours and no idea what to do. That day, I decided to ride my special motorcycle to work, something I occasionally did for a change of pace. Realizing I had some free time, I thought I might as well get a physical checkup, as it was overdue. I had never planned for it, but with nothing else to do, I decided to head to the nearby clinic for a health check. I still remember calling my girlfriend, asking if she wanted to go for a walk with me. However, she declined because of work. I told her, "No worries, I'll just go get a physical." And then I left the office, went down to the parking garage, changed into my riding gear, and got on my motorcycle. What was strange that day was, in all the 7 years I'd worked at that office, I had always turned left when leaving the building. But for some reason that day, I turned right. That direction led to a major and busy road, complete opposite of the quieter side streets I usually chose. I still can't explain why I did that, but that decision led to an event I could never have foreseen. Less than a quarter of a mile after turning, I stopped at a traffic light, waiting for the signal to turn left. When the green arrow appeared, I was the only person in the turning lane. The streets were relatively quiet in the late afternoon, and everything seemed peaceful. I gently pressed the gas pedal, preparing to turn, when suddenly, from the opposite side, a large SUV sped through the intersection at high speed. Everything happened too quickly. The car crashed straight into me, and I felt a powerful impact to my face. At that moment, I knew I was dead. But strangely, I didn't feel any pain or fear. Instead, my consciousness immediately left my body, as if there was no reason for me to remain. I didn't need to witness the chaos and destruction of the accident. In an instant, I was teleported to another place, a place filled with peace, warmth, and serenity. All feelings of worry, pain, or fear vanished, and I no longer cared about what was happening back on the ground. While I was in that peaceful state, back at the accident scene, the first person to arrive was a pastor who happened to be nearby. He was the one who pulled my body from under the burning SUV, as the flames from the engine started spreading and burning the lower part of my body. I was bleeding from my nose, eyes, mouth, and ears, and by all medical definitions, I was dead. The pastor began reading me my last rites, as if he had been placed there by God, the exact time and place to fulfill his divine mission. At another corner of the intersection, near a Jack-in-the-Box restaurant, 2 paramedics were waiting in line for food. If they had been behind anyone else in line, I might not be alive today to tell this story. But thanks to their fortunate position, they quickly noticed the accident and rushed to the scene. Within seconds, they began administering life-saving treatment, pulling me back from the brink of death. Behind the Jack-in-the-Box was a DMV, and by chance, one of my son's closest friends was there that day to take care of some personal business. He didn't normally frequent that area, but on that fateful day, he happened to be there. When they couldn't find my phone or ID due to the violent impact, he immediately called my son, who was working at In-N-Out Burger at the time. "Brandon, your dad's been in an accident," he said, and my son was left in shock. For me, the most emotional moments weren't the physical pain I had gone through. What affected me the most was the fear and sorrow that my loved ones had to endure. That was the biggest haunting thought in my mind when I looked back. My son, Brandon, asked his friend, "How do you know it's my dad?" His friend replied, "It's his bike. No one else has one like it." And so my family began their journey to the hospital, not knowing what they were about to face. When I was taken to the hospital, I was in a deep coma, Glasgow level 3 state, which in medical terms is almost synonymous with death. When the doctors met my family, they tried to soften the blow, saying, if he ever wakes up, and that's highly unlikely, he will have suffered severe brain damage and could be in a vegetative state for life. That wasn't the end. After the accident, I was no longer aware of what was happening. For the next 9 days, I lay in a deep coma, with a very slim chance of survival. The doctors told my family that I was unlikely to wake up, and if that miracle did happen, I might live as a vegetable due to severe brain damage. However, despite all the grim predictions, I woke up on the 9th day, on my birthday, no less. The moment I opened my eyes, first thing I felt was that nothing was the same as before. I didn't recognize where I was, I didn't know who I was, and I couldn't remember anything about my life before the accident. It was as if my entire memory and identity had been completely erased. It felt like a newborn, having to start all over again, learning how to perceive and connect with the world around me. My family had prepared themselves for the fact that I might never return to being the same person, even anticipating that I might never be able to care for myself again. The first surprise for me was how my body recovered. The doctors had previously warned that I would need extensive reconstructive surgery and would carry permanent scars. Yet, when I looked in the mirror after waking up, I saw no scars on my face, no signs of the disfigurement the doctors had. This wasn't just a miracle for me, but also for my family. Although my body seemed to recover quickly, my mind was a different story. I remembered nothing about myself. From speaking and walking to basic memories of my life, everything was gone. I felt like I was a completely new person, disconnected from the past. Confusion, fear, and uncertainty overwhelmed me in the early days after waking up. During my recovery, I had to start relearning everything from scratch. Learning how to walk again felt like an enormous challenge. Each step, each movement required intense concentration and effort. Physical therapy became an essential part of my daily life at the hospital. I remember tirelessly working just to take a few steps, and each of those steps felt like a small victory. In addition to the physical challenges, I also faced significant psychological struggles. I couldn't remember who I was. I knew nothing about my interests, passions, or memories that had shaped me as a person before. 3. It wasn't just memory loss in the conventional sense. It was as though my entire self had been wiped away. I felt like I was no longer the same person, but rather a new version of myself. My family supported me a great deal during this time. My son, Brandon, brought me photos of myself from before. Photos of me as a professional diver, having traveled the world, playing tennis at a high level. I looked at those pictures and felt like I was staring at a stranger. I couldn't connect with the image of who I was before, and that made me feel lost and disoriented. It wasn't just my memories of myself that were erased, but I also began to feel a detachment from the world around me. While others, family and friends to nurses and doctors, saw me as a specific individual, I perceived a different dimension. I saw people not just as physical beings, but as eternal souls. Each person carried within them a series of lifetimes, and I could clearly see the different identities they had held throughout their soul's journey. I remember at one point, when I was trying to talk to a nurse, I felt irritated when she asked me simple questions, treating me like a child. She just wanted to know if I recognized my girlfriend, but I found her question to be condescending. I sarcastically responded by calling my girlfriend the Queen, even though we had never used such pet names before. At that moment, I didn't realize that two parts of my consciousness were existing simultaneously. One part in my physical body, and another still connected to a different dimension, which I referred to as the portal. Throughout the recovery process, I began to realize that I wasn't just living in a physical reality, but also in a spiritual one. Each time I slept, I wasn't merely resting, I was taken back to the portal, a place where I felt complete peace and comfort. In that space, there was no stress, no pain, and everything had clear meaning. I didn't need to ask questions because everything was downloaded into my mind naturally. Every question about the meaning of life, the existence of God, and the nature of the soul became clear, and there was no need to search for more answers. At the same time, this separation made returning to normal life more difficult than ever. I felt like I no longer belonged to the material world, and everything around me became foreign. I couldn't understand why people behaved as though they were merely physical beings, while I saw them clearly as eternal souls, full of lifetimes and experience. My recovery was not just about the physical, but also the spiritual. I had to learn how to accept both parts of myself, the physical part, struggling to recover, and the soul still connected to another reality. After a long period of recovery, I gradually realized that my near-death experience was not just the physical body's effort to survive, but also a profound spiritual journey. While my physical self was still relearning how to speak, walk, and get used to daily life, my soul had begun to undergo supernatural experiences that were difficult to describe. I felt like I wasn't only living in this world, but also existing in another dimension, a place I called the portal. Each time I slept, my consciousness didn't rest as usual. Instead, I felt myself being drawn back into the portal, a place where I had experienced absolute peace right after the accident. There, I didn't have to face pain or worry about life's challenges. I was enveloped in a perfect sense of peace and tranquility, feeling as though everything had a clear reason and purpose. I didn't need to ask any questions, as all the answers were already present in my mind, as if they had been directly transmitted from an infinite source of knowledge. I don't know if you believe in the existence of supernatural beings or not, but I can tell you that I encountered and communicated with entities that I refer to as angels or Akashic spirit. These entities didn't speak to me in the usual way, but conveyed a form of understanding through intuition. It was as if they knew exactly what I was wondering, and the answer was downloaded into my mind instantly. I didn't need to ask. As soon as I thought of something, the answer was already there. In the world of the portal, I wasn't just a singular soul. I could clearly see that everyone in this life had lived through multiple lifetimes. No one is merely a physical entity, but a long chain of lifetimes and experience, each carrying a lesson and a purpose. This explained why, when I looked at the people around me, from the nurses in the hospital to my family and friends, I didn't just see them as physical beings, but as eternal souls. This feeling grew even stronger when I reunited with my loved ones. I clearly remember one time when I looked at my son, Brandon. I didn't just see a young man, but saw the long chain of lifetime he had lived. Each lifetime had left a mark on his soul, and I could sense all of it clearly. This confused me, because in the physical world, everyone behaves as if they are merely their current individual selves, without realizing that they carry a complex journey of the soul. Not just Brandon, but my girlfriend and everyone else around me became multidimensional in my eyes. I saw them not as the people I knew in this present life, but as spiritual entities who had existed through many different lifetimes. I could clearly see their past lives, and this made me feel like I was living in a completely different reality from everyone else. For 4 years after the accident, this near-death experience continued to linger with me. I felt as though I was constantly existing in 2 dimensions. One part of me still connected to the portal world, where I felt peace and comfort, while the other part of me was trying to reintegrate into normal life. Every time I fell asleep, my consciousness returned to the portal where I could communicate with supernatural beings. This experience didn't stop at just communicating with spirit. I was also imparted with profound insights about the nature of the universe, how everything functioned, and the meaning of existence. Things I had only imagined or learned about through religious texts before now became a reality in my mind. Everything had a purpose, and every event that happens in life is part of a larger plan that we can't see from our limited perspective. When I was younger, I always had a passion for religion and theology. I studied various religions and became a scholar of theology, always seeking the truth about God and the meaning of existence. Throughout that journey, I often wondered if what I had learned and studied was truly accurate. After my near-death experience, I realized that most of what I had been searching for was indeed correct. Everything I had read and studied, from biblical stories to the complex teachings of different religions, was confirmed to be true, though they were often simplified or narrated in a way that made them easier to understand. I clearly remember one thing the supernatural entities told me during my experience. The purpose of existence is not to seek answers to every question we have, but to experience and learn from everything around us. This is how our soul grows and evolves through each lifetime. We aren't here to understand everything, but to learn how to love, empathize, and connect with other souls. In those 4 years, I didn't just relearn how to live. I also learned to accept that life doesn't just exist in the material world, but also in another dimension. The material life is only a small part of the soul's entire journey, and every experience we have carries a much deeper meaning than we can ever understand.